And joining us now from our Parliament House studio is the Greens leader, Bob Brown. Thanks for being there.
Thanks, Tony.
Let me first get your reaction to the Coalition's continuing refusal to hand over their policies to the Treasury for costing.
Oh, it's a pretty poor show. I mean, there's been a leak out of Treasury and that should properly be investigated. But what really has the Coalition to hide here? That the costings they got from a private firm and the costing of Treasury should all be a transparent process. It should be open and honest with the public. And I see more than them not wanting to put the figures into Treasury. This is now becoming a show of rejection of the independence by Mr Abbott. I don't think he either wants them to surrender their independence and become numbers in a government that he establishes nailed down with total support for him, or there's a move starting underway here, and we saw it on the front page of The Australian today, to get a new election underway, which is quite unwarranted.
You think, well, that's what Bob Katter suggested last night might be the underlying motive. You're starting to see reasons to believe that's the case, are you?
Yes, and I think it's self-evident that Tony Abbott and his various spokespeople are not being very generous with the independents. They're not displaying a degree of accommodation for them, which they should. In fact, publicly saying we won't do a simple thing like have Treasury cost the Coalition's program. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Well, I think these independents are used to getting that sort of treatment in the Parliament and are going to be ultimately, unless Tony Abbott's not careful about this, driven to the only alternative, which is across the way with the Gillard Labor option. They want to deal with both sides. They want to get the best result for the Australian people, but that requires both the leaders, Mr Abbott and Miss Gillard, to give them an accommodation, and we're not seeing that from Tony Abbott at the moment.
OK, Bob Brown, we're now nearing on an actual election result. The number of seats won in the House of Representatives is very close to resolution. If they end up at 72 to Labor, 73 to the Coalition, as now seems likely, should Tony Abbott get the first chance, in your opinion, to form government?
Well, no. Both sides have still got to get to 76. And that will be proven on the first day back in the House, Tony. So, yes, he will be one seat closer there, although Adam Bant, who's just won the seat of Melbourne for the Greens, has indicated a preference to help the Gillard government back into government. But no doors are closed there. But, you know...
Can I just interrupt you there, because Adam Bant went a little further than that in the National Press Club, said he might even be prepared to consider some sort of coalition arrangement or an alliance, he didn't call it a coalition, with Labor in the House of Representatives. Would you consider that his vote, therefore, should be counted on the Labor side?
Well, not yet, but it's very clearly an indication of that. He, by the way, he was just saying he wouldn't reject any proposal. He wasn't saying that he was looking for a coalition, no, far from it. He was saying he wasn't rejecting anything at this stage. But we have quite a way to go yet. The independents are in a process of negotiating by being informed by the bureaucracy, which is going to take all next week. We won't have the final vote in a number of seats until then. This process takes a little while. It's a good thing. It's thorough. It's getting more informed. Overseas governments frequently wait months. It's not going to be months. And there's very good intent. You can hear that from Tony Windsor saying, this will work out well. Just let's take time. But already there's some ankle biting going on from the opposition and from a section of the media.
Okay,
and,
but these numbers, Bob Brown, sorry to interrupt, these numbers are going to be absolutely critical. And if Adam Bant says he's going to side with the Labor Party, that'll make it 73 all in a 73-72 split. That's a pretty critical number to have on your side. And so I guess everyone's wondering whether you agree with that.
Oh, yes, Adam and I talk about this a lot, and we do with our colleagues. We've had a phone link up with a party room phone link up today. We'll have another one, in fact, in Canberra on Tuesday. So we're working very hard on it because we feel responsible for making sure that the Australian people get a secure government out of this. We are suggesting some means to make sure that when government does come along, it's more secure, like ensuring that inadvertence of a vote in either house is met with a recommittal of a vote to make sure that we get votes right in a very close lower house and upper house in the coming session, Tony. Looking to make sure there will be a secure government, but with an injection of ideas coming out from outside the minority party that makes up that government offers a lot of prospect for Australians.
What about something, Bob Brown, more radical, like what's happened in Tasmania, an alliance between the Tasmanian Greens and the Labor Party in Tasmania has led to a stable government, at least up until now. They have an agreed legislative agenda and so on. Would you consider such a thing with the Labor Party yourself? Is it even under consideration?
Well, we've said we'll talk with both sides about all options. Let me put it this way, Tony. There is, in the ranks of the Greens, very experienced parliamentarians. Christine Milne and Rachel Seward, for example. If I were Tony Abbott or if I were Julia Gillard, I'd be thinking what an asset it would be to have talent like that in a more active role within government.
What, possibly a cabinet role? Is that the sort of thing you might be contemplating?
I think they ought to contemplate that. It is not up for us to do that or to make any demands. But I think for the good of the country, they ought to look at the talent. And indeed, although they've, I think, rejected this early on, at the independents themselves, they've been there for a long time. I had a talk with Tony Windsor today. What a splendid and genuine parliamentarian this man is.
Yeah, but with respect, Bob Brown, you can't speak for him, but you can speak for your own party and you can speak for yourself and theoretically, since you've had talks with your other senior Greens, you could talk to the possibility of them wanting cabinet positions in a kind of alliance arrangement such as is in Tasmania. So you're saying it's up to the government to speak to you about that. So have they made any approaches to you? Have they sent emissaries? Have they spoken to you about this at all?
No, the government hasn't, and the opposition haven't, Tony. And but if I were them, I would be looking at that option. As it is, we are very content to ensure stability of the government, to ensure that the Senate works well so that there is an accountability of government in the Senate and the good outcomes we saw from the Greens' work in the last Senate. I'm also talking with Senator Xenophon, who's got good ideas on the matter. So there's a very healthy injection of ideas going into this mix, and a week or two from now it will come up with a result.
It certainly appears so, and it does appear that you may have in mind, at least on your side of politics, the possibility of doing the Tasmanian experiment at a federal level. And let's say that experiment's also already been repeated in the UK with the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives striking an alliance with an agreed legislative agenda. Is that the sort of thing you might have in mind? Is that what you would like to see them come to you?
No, I haven't. No, we haven't talked about that at that level, Tony. I'm saying that it's one of the options I would be considering if I were Tony Abbott or Julia Gillard.
Can you really imagine Tony Abbott? I mean, I'm not ruling that out, but it doesn't sound as likely that Tony Abbott might go for something like that. But do you think are things as radical now? Is the shift as radical as that you might even imagine a Tony Abbott Green alliance?
I think if Tony Abbott had his marbles, he would, and he has. I think he would go to those three experienced crossbenchers with a view to giving them an active role in government. Now, they may say as independents they don't want to, but there is great talent, experience and integrity available there to enrich the next government. I think the coalition should be thinking about that, because that's how it works elsewhere overseas, and governments are all the better for it. You should look at the wider talent pool, not the narrow winner-take-all view that has bedevilled Australian politics so far. OK,
now you've got to wait until July next year before you hold the balance of power in the Senate, but I'm interested in how you will exercise that balance of power with the little time we've got left. Will you attempt to use that balance of power to create a legislative agenda or to force a legislative agenda on the House of Representatives, and particularly on, let's start with a carbon tax?
Yeah, not force anything. We want to negotiate a carbon price. It will be at the top of the agenda with whoever's the next government, Tony. And we, of course, will legislate in the Senate ideas that won't come out of the House, and we will be talking with the next government to ensure that when legislation goes through the Senate, it will have time to be properly considered and expeditiously. So it's not left on the shelf as it was during the Howard years, but is dealt with by the House, the same as all House legislation coming up to the Senate is dealt with quite quickly.
But could you imagine a deal with one of the major parties to form the sort of alliance that I was talking about earlier, which had these kind of things as key elements of the legislative agenda? And I would include in that, for example, issues like asylum seekers, gay marriage, public funding of private schools, parental leave and so on.
And we've already got from Labor, and then the Liberals followed through, a proposal to fund an inquiry into high-speed rail, which is something the Greens have been working hard for. And last election, of course, we got a rise in pensions across the country. Yes, we will be looking at stimulating the next government with an injection of the Greens ideas, which proved so popular during the election campaign and saw that big swing across to the Greens, and of course the number of Greens in the Parliament growing from 5 to 10, Tony. It's our job not just to keep governments accountable, but to put very popular ideas like the ones you have just listed into a position in the Parliament where they have a chance of being debated by everybody. And a debate on Afghanistan, of course, is something this Parliament's been very remiss in not debating Afghanistan over the last 10 years, and we will be working to see there is a debate in the coming months.
Bob Brown, we're out of time, I'm afraid. So much more to talk about. Hopefully we'll be able to do that in days and weeks to come, but we thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Tony.